What is your position on suspension for students? I find it can destroy a student's success in school. There needs to be an alternative to keeping kids in school. Candidate Moore?
They don't work. They don't work. They're proven to not work. They don't treat the root cause. They don't help out the kid that's being suspended. They don't come back thinking, oh shucks, I've learned my lesson, I'll never do that again. They come back behind in school and feeling further alienated and ashamed and like that bad kid. And then it repeats and they're gonna get suspended again and again and again. It doesn't work, it doesn't keep anybody safer, and we need to do away with that sort of discipline entirely and look at real conflict resolution practices, ways that we can engage and find out the root cause of that behavior. Why is this child acting out that way? Figure out what's going on there, and sometimes those solutions are really, really simple if we just look. Sometimes it's as simple a need as taking a shower. I know that kids have been sent to in-school suspension or to RTC, intentionally acted out just so that they could get out of the classroom and then quietly pull aside an administrator because they just needed a shower because they didn't have one at home. No more.
Candidate Morris?
I'm sorry. Yeah, suspensions are ineffective. They don't solve the problem. Nothing happens in a vacuum. And so usually everybody, we come to work, we come to school with our problems. And sometimes those bleed into the school day. And if you're not addressing what's the underlying issue, then it's just gonna keep happening. Suspension is just a smackdown to a kid who did something. You got all lined down, now I'm gonna strike back at you. And it doesn't really address the situation. I've been suspended before. I came back to school 3-4 days later, and I was just behind in my homework. It doesn't really make for like I didn't feel like I was having any type of restitution or that I learned anything from it. If your kid doesn't have running water at his home, I didn't have running water at one point. I had to warm up some snow so I could take a bath. That made me late for school. That made me mad. These things happen. These are the problems that people have, and you have to address them.
Thank you. Candidate Jackson?
That's fully loaded for me because my mind is racing. But I would say that, I won't say that there's never a time where I don't feel that suspension is not in order, but right now it's out of hand because it is disproportionate, because it is black students at the highest rate that's being suspended. Ta-Nehisi Coates said that a black man is deemed criminal at his highest quality. And so I think that is the mentality, unfortunately, that people have about students of color. And so that's an issue. So we need to find a way to mentor them. Another thing, and I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that there's a district that says that any parent, any student that had contact with the police, they would contact the school and just say, FYI, there was contact. So you could already be prepared if this student is acting out of order today, and you have a little bit more patience to understand his circumstances. So there's things we can do and not suspend students, but let's coach them and teach them and counsel them.
Thank you. Candidate Herschel?
It's suspension. We're trying to reduce suspension rates. They were higher suspension rates due to the state laws, which they have changed so that there's more forgiveness on certain offenses. Before, there was some things you had to suspend because the law told you to, but the state legislators have turned that law around a little bit and gave more freedom to the district, and we are looking at, and we have changed things, that some things are not we won't suspend them, that before we had to.
Thank you. Anyone like to review?
I just have a question. So Herschel, you spoke about the modification and the board endeavoring to change that. So what are some, can you give me some examples of what has been put in place in order to change the idea of so many students being suspended? What are some of the things that's been implemented? And what things are you talking about when you said, now there are things we won't suspend students about? So like, what are some of those things?
Well, there are things like, if there was a student that was in a fight and turned around, and as the student turned, there was a safety officer. They pushed the safety officer. Before, by the state law, that would have been contact with an adult and they would be suspended. Now we don't have to do that. There are little subtle different things that we can look at and we don't have to suspend to, but the law used to make us have to suspend to.
Okay, so then my last question would be, but are we still suspending those students that commit those acts?
I don't direct suspend people because the board doesn't do that, it's the administrators. But I've heard several stories that they're not suspending because of certain things that have changed in the law.
Okay, well, the reason why I asked is because my nephew was one of those students, and I know that he was suspended because he had contact with staff, and so, yeah, we'll have to work with that.
That's something that we would need to work on.
Yeah, I would like clarification on that policy as well. Right now, we have a discipline matrix, so the person who is handing down that discipline can kind of choose from a few options based on the situation and based on their own bias and how they feel about, about the student and how they feel about school discipline. So, I mean, it varies wildly depending on who is getting that referral, which box they're going to check, and what, what fate that kid has. And the people that are doing that are often not individuals who are trained to understand adolescent behavior, people that maybe aren't trained in the school environment, parapros who, they're working, but they're bringing to the job their own bias and their own kind of lack of understanding about the issues that our kids are facing. And I personally don't trust people like that to hand out suspensions to my kids.
Okay, thank you.